What's going on, lovebirds?
Welcome to the show.
You guys are now lovebirds, members of the love tribe.
I don't know what you said, but Siri just came on. So apparently lovebird sounds like Siri or
Siri or Alexa?
Alexa. Oops.
Or Siri. I thought it's Siri and Alexa.
Yeah, you're right. I don't know.
Alexa is spying on us. Well, we hope you guys had a wonderful Valentine's Day last week. We actually recorded this show as our Valentine's Day date, I guess we could call it that. And it was a great one. And the one next week, we also recorded on Valentine's Day. So lots of good stuff. Love is in the air, where we welcomed Dr. Cassandra Bolar, and she had a lot of great stuff. We focused in and talked about how to know if your partner is the one. So if you're listening and you're single or dating, this is great. But even if you're in a committed relationship, it's a valuable podcast because there are things that you need to ask yourself, not to like exit the relationship just in case they're not the one, you chose wrong. That might be valuable too, but more so just to ask yourself, because there can be things you can discuss with your partner of like, maybe there are things you skipped over early in the relationship that are conversations you should have had. And it doesn't mean you're with the wrong person, but they're conversations that you can now have. And Cassandra gives us some great tools and information to have these conversations.
Just a little bit about Dr. Cassandra Bolar. For over 13 years, she has been engaged in community-based programming and research efforts that focus on improving outcomes for children and their families. And she is based in Georgia. And you might hear a couple little coos from her newborn baby that she was holding as we were interviewing. And yeah, we were basically doing the same thing 3 years ago. So we were right there with her. So in the interview, Cassandra talks about 4 red flags that are called the 4 horsemen, which are criticism, contempt, stonewalling, defensiveness. If any of those 4 red flags pop up in your relationship and you really want some tools and resources to work on those, we would love for you guys to check out our course, Spark My Relationship. The whole first module is based on how to avoid these toxic relationship patterns in your relationship. So we encourage you guys to check it out. We had a Valentine's special going on last week, but if you missed that special, you can still go to the website sparkmyrelationship.com/unlock, and we have a special offer just for our listeners of ID Podcast. So we would love for you guys to check that out.
Enjoy today's show.
Today's show is brought to you by our online course, Spark My Relationship. Create more passion, improve your communication, and build a stronger, more intimate connection with your partner in less than 90 days. We've collaborated with 15 therapists and psychologists to bring you the strategies marriage therapists teach their clients. To unlock a special offer only for I Do Podcast listeners, visit sparkmyrelationship.com/unlock. That's sparkmyrelationship.com/unlock. Hi, Cassandra. Thanks so much for joining us on the show today.
Hey, I'm so delighted to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
We like to start the show with having you tell us and our listeners why you enjoy helping people improve their relationships.
Most definitely. It's just my desire to help people create the skills and the knowledge that they need to have healthy relationships. A lot of my work comes from, I have a big background in doing health disparities research, looking at child health disparities. And we're trying to improve social, emotional outcomes for children, as well as their academic outcomes. But, those kids go back home to a home environment where they may not be getting that encouragement, or they may not be seeing healthy examples of marriage or healthy examples of relationships. And so my desire was to really kind of take a more preventative route. I always say that it's always easier to prevent a fire rather than fight a fire. So I really wanted to help these kids when they're going home to these contexts, and even also when it comes to creating a legacy of healthy relationships. And so I really love to equip couples and individuals with the tools that they need to create not only a healthy relationship for themselves, but also to empower them to create a healthy legacy of relationships as well.
That's awesome perspective to have and take in your work. And we'll have to have you back on and we can really dive into that childhood aspect of the examples and having the legacy, because so much of how we learn to be in relationship is based on our childhood, how we see our parents in relationship, and how we receive love from them. So it's really fascinating, and it definitely is going to affect how we choose a partner. And that's kind of maybe a good segue into today's topic of how to know if the person we're with is someone we should be marrying or committing to a long-term relationship with. And sometimes that can be hard to know because relationships are difficult. And early on, there's the honeymoon phase and you got all these good chemicals and you feel like you're in love, but that's not always the best indicator. So why don't we jump right in and talk about the major things we need to ask ourselves when committing to a long-term relationship?
Most definitely. I always say that one of the most important decisions that you can ever make in your life is who you choose to marry. And like you were saying earlier, oftentimes we can get clouded by infatuation, or we can oftentimes even be clouded by that person presenting him or her best self in the beginning. And so I think it's always important to make sure that you're making a clear and a sober decision. And so with that, there are various different factors that you want to think about because you want to make sure that it's a decisive decision and not something you're sliding into. Also, Scott Stanley is a researcher, and he talks a lot about how when you slide into these big relationship commitments, oftentimes you don't have the same level of stability. Oftentimes you don't have the same level of satisfaction. And when I say sliding into a relationship, we are creatures, we like to invest, right? And when we make huge investments, oftentimes we don't want to leave whatever we've invested in because we don't want to lose that return. And so with making those sober decisions, what I think is important is, first of all, to figure out, well, do we have the same shared values? Does this person even want to aspire to get married? Are you on the same page when it comes to that? And as well as not only are you on the same page when it comes to where you want this relationship to go, because sometimes there may be a discrepancy with one person may be aspiring to get married. One other person may kind of just be dating just to have fun. So you really want to make sure that you're on the same page, that you have similar values. Oftentimes in therapy, I see a lot of people come in and they think, oh, well, we have such different personalities. That's not a big, huge problem that you don't have similar personalities. You want to make sure that you have similar core values. So this person values family life. So this person has the same type of values that you have and that they can coincide well. Also, too, this is something important because this is going to come up in any relationship, is conflict. How does this person manage conflict? Does he or she manage conflict well? And when I say that, there are some indicators of unhealthy ways to manage conflict when it comes to a relationship. Dr. John Gottman, who is one of the most renowned researchers when it comes to studying relationships and marriage, he can even pinpoint by observing couples up to about a 90-something odd percent accuracy whether couples will get divorced based on how they engage with one another. And he has these 4 interaction styles that he terms the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse because they could be just that dangerous for a relationship. So when you're looking at this marital partner or potential marital partner, have you seen this person upset? And how does this person handle conflict and manage conflict? And these are some things that you want to make sure that this person avoids, or even you avoid when it comes to healthy relational functioning. 1, criticism. You want to make sure that this person doesn't always criticize you when he or she gets upset. Secondly, contempt. And third, stonewalling. And then lastly, defensiveness. So you really, because there are going to be some joint decisions that you're going to have to make together as a couple. And with that being said, sometimes conflict can come up. So you want to make sure that, you and your partner can handle conflict and manage it well, because it will be definitely, it will come up when it comes to marriage.
There's so much great stuff in here. And just touching on that last point of, we have a relationship advice podcast. And I think a lot of people in their relationship get concerned, like there's conflict. And it's like, we're not trying to prevent conflict. We're trying to manage it, like you said, because conflict is inevitable and it's how we grow in a relationship. And that's why relationships can be so great, is because they can be a mirror onto the things that you're not doing great as a human being or as a parent or as a partner. So that a lot of times manifests itself as conflict when you have a disagreement with your partner. And that disagreement might be because you're in the wrong. And that's that mirror back onto yourself. And that's how we grow. And that's why, being in a relationship is great. And bringing this back to knowing if it's the right person, it's those things. Conflict is okay, but being aware of the four horsemen, like you mentioned, and realizing that it's going to happen, but that if our values are the same or similar, or at least not completely different on everything, then that foundation is one of the most important things.
Most definitely. And conflict can also be an opportunity for growth. It's not, like you said, it's not necessarily an indication that something is wrong with your relationship. It's going to happen. You live in close quarters with someone for long enough, conflict will definitely flare up. As well as, thinking about your own personal fulfillment, your partner, your marital partner, you want someone who's going to support what you're passionate about, because your total fulfillment as an individual won't necessarily come just from your marriage. There may be a cause, there may be something that you're extremely passionate about, and you want to make sure that your partner is kind of on board and supportive of you engaging in even some outside interests and supportive of that time. And just some of the basics, such as, integrity. Does this person display integrity? Is this person honest? Is this person trustworthy? Some of those basic characteristics are very, very important. And I would also say that, do you have a peace about moving forward in a relationship or moving toward marriage with this individual? Now, we all get this idea of, men on their wedding days having cold feet. And research does show from UCLA that men are more likely to have cold feet on their wedding day. But what we do know from the research, actually, that was published in the Journal of Family Psychology, is that when women have cold feet on their wedding day, that is an indication that it may be more likely to dissolve the marriage. And what they found in that study was that women who had cold feet on the day of their wedding day, they were twice as likely to actually be divorced 4 years later compared to brides who did not have a sense of having cold feet. So, do you have a sense of peace about moving forward in a relationship with this person? That is kind of that gut feeling. Your gut can tell you a lot about, is this a good person? Does this necessarily feel right to me? That's important as well.
I would love to expand a little bit more on when you talked about whether a partner has certain passion and being passion for certain hobbies or things like that, and then how that can affect the relationship in terms of, I guess that's not really considered a core value, but it does affect a relationship if maybe one person is super passionate about something.
Surfing.
Chase is over here surfing, or really anything, and then how that affects the relationship. Not that I've ever felt inferior to surfing, but I can definitely see how in certain relationships, if one partner is super passionate about a hobby, can make someone else feel inferior to the relationship or second. So prior to getting married, if those feelings are happening with somebody, how would you express those feelings to really make sure that they're not making a wrong decision and that they actually are, I guess, second to the relationship? The hobby is first.
Oh, wow. That's really good. Because I think you have to communicate about that. If you feel like this hobby or this passion is taking precedence over the relationship, then that's something that you definitely want to communicate. And, because the reality is that we all receive love in different ways. And, if quality time is very important to you and you feel like this person is spending more quality time with this outside endeavor, then that could be extremely problematic for the well-being of the relationship and how satisfied you are. And so, if you see that on the front end, have an open and honest conversation about it. Because if this other person is getting fulfillment out of it, you don't want to just take it away and say, oh, you can't ever have fun in this area or whatnot. But also too, someone's personal passions, whether it not necessarily just be a hobby, but even your career passions, things that you're very passionate about professionally, maybe even a cause that you want to do in the community. The person doesn't have to drop your partner doesn't have to drop his or her life, but is he or she supportive of that? And I think that you raise a great question about, if that person's spending too much time in that, because we can spend a lot of time in something that's good, but if it's detracting from the relationship, then that could potentially be a problem. And so you just want to have open and honest communication about those things early on and set a precedent. They have this idea, John Gottman also coined this, it's called the poop detector, okay? And what's really interesting about that is that if something rubs you the wrong way, it's really important to make mention of that early on so that the stench of it doesn't just linger. So, early on in the relationship, which is an optimal time, even before you get married, bring that up. Let that person know so that it doesn't continue to bother you long down the road. And then 5 and 10 years later, you feel like, wow, I feel so neglected in the relationship. So, making indication of that early on can actually salvage some of your own satisfaction and well-being in the relationship.
You mentioned communicating around these things and doing that early in the relationship. And we talk about it so much on the show, but this is just another example of communicating, hey, it bothers me when you go surfing twice a day, every day. And saying that doesn't have to be like the first week you're dating, but right. as it's becoming more serious, if that bothers you and you like the person and that way, maybe that person's not willing to change and you have a conversation around that. And then, you can decide if that's the relationship you continue to pursue. And I'm glad Sarah brought that up because it's something that I would imagine many probably type A people, if you're in a relationship with a type A person that just gets, very driven, really gets into things, this can be a reoccurring theme of, that partner is very dedicated to their hobby or to their work, and it can sometimes feel like that takes priority over the relationship. And I try to tell Sarah, it's like in the same way that I want, that I love her and our daughter, not in the same way, but it's hard to describe like my passion for surfing. It's not that those two things are equal or more, but my need and my drive to pursue a lifestyle that involves surfing is a big priority in my life. It's not more important than Sarah and our daughter, but it's it's a thing, right? And so communicating that, and Sarah knows this, and that's why our relationship works, but we have to continue to communicate about that. We did it early on, but things change. When you have kids, it's not quite as cool to be surfing as much when there's more things to be done at the house. We have a kid. And so we're finding we have to constantly update that communication, so that Sarah is happy and that I'm happy, and we're both finding a compromise that I don't have to give up my passion, but she doesn't feel like she's coming separate to my passion.
But before we continue on, we want to tell you about today's sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Babbel.
Babbel is the numero uno selling language learning app in the world that helps you speak a new language with confidence. To see how confidently I said numero uno, it's because I practice Spanish on Babbel. And not only can you learn Spanish, which is super helpful since we live in Costa Rica, but you can also learn French, Italian, German, Russian, Swedish, and more, over 14 different languages.
Babbel's short 10 to 15-minute lessons are available on the app or online and are designed to get you speaking confidently in your new language within weeks. You can try Babbel for free. Go to babbel.com or download the app and try it for free. That's Babbel, BABBEL.com, or download the app to try it for free. Babbel, speak a new language with confidence.
Today's episode is also brought to you by Native.
Chase and I are very particular when it comes to deodorants. We don't want to be all smelly, but we also don't want to use products that contain chemicals and aluminums.
Deodorants are a funny thing to be particular about.
Yeah, who wants to be all smelly?
And to use chemicals, and that's why we love Native. Native is made with clean ingredients that are safe and effective. Even for me here in hot and humid Costa Rica, I managed to not smell myself too much, which is good. Native comes in a wide variety of enticing scents for men and women. Plus, they release new limited edition seasonal scents throughout the year. They also offer an unscented formula and baking soda free formula for those with sensitivities. We have their lavender and rose, and not only does it smell great, but it leaves us dry and smelling nice for sometimes up to 16 hours. I don't really last that long because I'm outside.
Well, I do. Although Native is priced at a slight premium when compared to conventional deodorants, it's totally worth it. Aluminum is in a lot of brands out there, and it may be linked to some serious health ramifications, including breast cancer and Alzheimer's. For 20% off your first purchase, visit nativedeodorant.com and use the promo code I do during checkout. For 20% off your first order, visit nativedeodorant.com and use the promo code I do during checkout.
Most definitely. And having that open and honest communication early on. And as you were saying too, there are different seasons to your relationship and your marriage. And like you were saying, when you have young children, sometimes you have to juggle things a little bit differently, or whether you are part of that sandwich generation, you're caring for elderly parents while having children in the home. So there are various different aspects to the different seasons that you may be in your relationship that would also affect the time that you dedicate to your marriage, and then even some of those outside interests. Also, too, I think I would love to talk about how I think when we're thinking about a marital partner, whether he or she is the one, oftentimes there's this idea that, there's only one soulmate. And if I find the perfect person, I won't have to do much work. We just will be totally compatible, and things will just run smoothly, but that is definitely a misconception. We all have the capacity to grow into being someone's soulmate. So the longer you are with your marital partner, of course, compatibility is important, but you're going to have to work with with whomever you decide to marry. You're going to have to work with that person. And the longer you get to know that person, the more you'll know his or her dislikes, and the more that you can kind of find this delicate balance and this delicate dance of being each other's soulmate, because you get to know each other a little bit better. So you know how to kind of work together even better. And so I think sometimes people feel like if things are not just easy and it's not secondhand nature, then maybe this isn't the one. No, if anything, marriage is going to be utilized, like you said, as a mirror, and growth doesn't happen always in 100% comfort. Sometimes it is that discomfort that catapults us into the growth that we need. We just want to make sure that we're doing it in a healthy way, a very healthy and supportive way, not in a demeaning way. But I just wanted to also talk about, this idea of, well, if I find the perfect person, these will be easy and smooth. It's going to take work regardless.
I love that you brought that up, because it's something that we've personally, or I have shared this story on the podcast, that I felt early in our relationship is I really liked Sarah. Like, we were living together very early on, but I wasn't particularly looking to be in a long-term relationship at the time. And so there was some elements of resistance there, and she was just getting out of a relationship. And then I didn't have these crazy feelings of like, she's my soulmate, like later on. And I've shared this, like I said, I'm not breaking this on Sarah right now, so everyone knows, but it was something that I struggled with, because I'm like, all right, do we continue this relationship? Because in the movies, it's supposed to feel differently, or I don't know, because I don't know how it feels. I've never married anyone before. And so and I would have some talks with my mom, who is a cognitive therapist, and just my mom, and a great person to bounce things off of. And she's the one that made me understand that sometimes you can grow together, and you grow into a deeper love. And then having done this podcast and talking to people like yourselves, it seems like a lot of times that's actually a healthier way to enter into a long-term relationship. And not that there's any wrong way to do it, but that, it's easy when all those hormones and oxytocin and everything's firing, and you're like madly in love with someone, but that goes away, unfortunately. And then you're left with the real stuff. And if things like your values don't align, if your partner's not supportive of your passion, then everything else doesn't really matter for the long term. And I just want to, thank you for bringing that up, because it's such an important thing that I wish I heard early on in Sarah and I's relationship as just comfort. It doesn't mean that person still might be wrong for you, but that it's okay to not lock eyes with the person across the room and then the first time you meet, and that's your soulmate. And I think that's what we're told, and it's the fairy tale, it's the cultural narrative that's really popular, and it's just, maybe it happens sometimes, and that's a beautiful thing, but the majority of the time it's not the way it goes down, and relationships take hard work.
Yes, they do. And oftentimes it's easy to become disillusioned when you are just so high off of, like you were saying, that those bonding chemicals, that oxytocin, that newness definitely does, it leaves. Eventually you become familiar with this person, and you want to have the skills and the knowledge that are needed to actually develop and build a healthy relationship and marriage. So I agree completely with what you were saying there.
So we've established some of the core things that we need to look for, like having that foundational set of values that we can share with our partner, in knowing what our deal breakers are, so that if they don't share those values, they might not have to be every single one, but you got to know personally what your deal breakers are. If your partner is not meeting a majority of those or whatever you decide, you need to be honest with yourself and come to terms with that and maybe discuss it with your partner. Otherwise, need to move on. And that obviously is a gray area. There's no one exact thing to ask and then a checklist. And if you don't check it off, then they're not the one. So besides the values, are there any other major things supporting your partner's passion, things like that we need to ask ourselves as far as knowing if this is the person we want to commit to?
Most definitely. You are choosing a marital partner, but you are also choosing the future parent of your children. And does this person have the qualities and the characteristics that you believe would make a wonderful parent? And I'm glad that you said too, because oftentimes, let's just take a typical situation. Oftentimes when we're thinking about infatuation, a lot of times people who we're maybe extremely attracted to or infatuated with, they may not always necessarily have those qualities that will make a good parent. So you have to ask yourself, because you're literally choosing your child's parent, does this person have what I would like to have as a partner? Would this person make a good father? Would this person make a good mother? Those are things that you also want to think about and consider. And then lastly, like I was saying before, who you choose to marry is probably one of the most important decisions of your life, because this individual is going to have an opportunity to influence so many different areas of your life, such as just what you eat, places that you go on vacation, your health, your mental health. And so a question you have to ask yourself is, are you willing to accept influence from this person? And that is so critical, because they're going to influence your life regardless. But are you willing to accept some degree of influence from that person? And even so, research has shown that when in partners who are unwilling to accept their partner's influence, especially for wives, when husbands are unwilling to accept influence from each other, that can negatively affect the marital satisfaction. And so you want to ask yourself, this person's going to influence my life to a certain degree. We are married. We're living in close quarters. We're going to be doing a lot of things together. We're going to be doing life together. And in doing life together, am I willing to accept this person's influence in my life? Is this going to be the person I bounce ideas off about when I need to make a career change? Am I willing to accept some of those suggestions this person may have? So that's really important, because you're going to be doing life with this individual. So I'd say that's a very important question to ask yourself.
Cassandra, you have given us and our listeners some great things to think about. And yeah, it's like we need to be mindful in these moments, because our brains can get hijacked by the dopamine, by the story that we tell ourselves of, asking if that person's going to be a good parent. The guy on the bike who's a bad boy wearing the leather jacket is very appealing and sexy for the romanticism of it, right? It's like the typical story, right? But that's very surface level, and it can be easy to get caught up in that. And that's like the cliche version, but there's different degrees of all that, right? And just asking ourselves, like you said, like, how's this person going to be in doing life together? I love that because that's like the nitty gritty stuff that we're going to go through life with this person, and the ups and downs and being a parent. And it's not very glamorous, changing diapers and being super tired. And how is that person going to be in those times? And obviously we can't just overanalyze this, because you could drive yourself crazy. But if you're honest with yourself and you ask yourself these questions, and you've spent some time with this individual, but really be honest with yourself, I think we can tell. And if you're constantly lying to yourself of like, oh, in overlooking things that are very important to you. I guess it's kind of like you need to decide how many of those things you're going to overlook. And at a certain point, just have a real honest conversation with yourself and come to terms with it. If it's something that you're willing to live with, or move on and find someone that's going to be a better fit. And obviously it's not an exact science, but I think if we use these tools that you've mentioned here today, we'll be well on our way to choosing the right partner.
Yes. And, I really think that this highlights how you have to be future oriented, and thinking about, well, will this person make a good parent? When we're in our elderly years, do I want to be on the front porch in a rocking chair talking to this person, as well as, do we have a similar vision for what we want our futures to look like? Oh, that is so critical. And having those conversations, such as, it's okay if you don't want certain things in life. You want to make sure that it's at least some, similar to what your partner's vision is for the future. Such as something very simple. One person wants to have children, the other person doesn't. You can't believe that marriage is going to change that person's mind. That person has a different vision for his or her future. And so you have to honor that. And if it's a non-negotiable, something that you totally don't want to live without in your life, you have to make those hard decisions now instead of trying to make them later.
We need a whole episode dedicated to children and having children and how many children, because we have yet to do that, and we need to do that. So maybe we'll have you back on the show to talk about that topic.
Oh, yes, I'd be more than happy.
Well, thank you so much, Cassandra, for joining us on the show and sharing with us all the great information. Let's wrap up by having you tell our listeners where they can find you online, and then we'll say goodbye.
Okay, wonderful. You can find me at Therapy Co Counseling. That's Therapy CO Counseling.com. Also, too, I have a book for premarital couples or people who are even single, and it's called Preparing Your Heart for Marriage. It really focuses on the internal, emotional, and spiritual work that you can do to actually put your heart in a healthy place for marriage. And that's at marriageheadstart.com. Marriagehead, HEAD, start.com.
Excellent. Well, we'll have the link to your book and your website on your show notes page on our website at idopodcast.com. And again, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much. It was my pleasure.
Hi guys, we hope you enjoyed today's episode. As always, all the links are in the show notes page as well as on the podcast description. And while you're on our website, we encourage you guys to check out our 14-day Happy Couple Challenge. We send you an email for 14 days with simple, doable challenges to help strengthen and improve your relationship. And on our website, we also have a bunch of free resources for your relationship. So we encourage you to check those out. We also have our Love Tribe on Facebook. We encourage you guys to join the tribe and be there for support for each other. If you have questions or just need some relationship advice, we are all here for each other. The group has grown to almost 1,000 people, and we love it. So we hope you guys join that. You can go to Facebook, Love Tribe Fam, and you'll find us right there. And if you are interested in learning more about our flagship course, Spark My Relationship, we hope you guys check it out. We have a special offer that is only for podcast listeners. So you can go to sparkmyrelationship.com/unlock, and you can unlock that special offer and learn more. As always, thank you guys so much, and we'll see you next week.